It's not your fault, Maya. It's just that for some reason you got old before I did. My husband even tried to smile, looking for additional explanations for his actions. Yesterday he came home in high spirits, helped by the bottle in his hands. Maya, I'm going to have a son, he said with a silly smile. Of course, I immediately understood what he was talking about, and even had a rough idea who might be the candidate who would contribute to his fatherhood. In the morning, I asked him what changes were coming in our lives in connection with yesterday's news. You'll have to leave, he said, preferably away from here. How far away? I asked, hoping that His Majesty would not send me to another planet. Ever since my husband's business took off, Eve'd been expecting something like this. It is said that money spoils people. I don't know if I agree with that, but the fact that money makes a person completely different is for sure. At the very beginning of our family life, we had problems. I had a late miscarriage, which led to my subsequent infertility. For a long time we tried to have an heir by all means, but everything was in vain, and we gave up. My husband went into business, and I became obsessed with creativity. Everyone lived in a world that was interesting to them, and our paths almost never crossed. In spite of everything, I continued to love Artyom, if only out of habit. Perhaps you should go to your sister in the village. It will be more effective to draw your pictures there. The views are richer. You don't seem to be interested in the entertainment of the city. So, I felt ashamed that I was so old at 42. I don't go to fancy clubs. I don't wear a short skirt and a halter top. I do not dye my hair a bright color, and I do not make my eyelashes longer so that the strokes are visible to everyone around me. Apparently, people like me are not in fashion these days, which is why my husband is in a hurry to part with me, like an outdated sofa. We parted almost civilly. I did not use my husband's business as a guarantee for the well-being of his new family, nor for our house. I wanted his son to grow up in normal conditions. But I did insist that my husband, now ex-husband, buy a small house for me in the same village where my sister lived. At my age, you need peace and quiet, and my sister, unlike me, had a large family. So I settled in the village and immediately attracted the attention of the locals. So young and alone. The local women exclaimed at the sight of me. Who's young? Me? My husband just threw me out like an old garbage can. Yes, I'm not fashionable. I'm not a modern me. But the women did not give up. They decided that I desperately needed to get married and kept offering me new options. One of these suitors was a widower with 2 children who lived in a house on the outskirts of the village. One day we were walking from the river with a group of my nephews and nieces. We had just caught 16 carp and were very proud of ourselves. As we passed a fence, a shrill barking attracted the children's attention, and they clung to the fence. I followed their example and also looked into the yard of the house where these sounds were coming from. Dad, please. Don't give it away, cried a girl of about 5 years old. We'll do everything ourselves. You won't even notice we have a dog, the older boy said. The matter is settled, no dogs, replied a huge man with broad shoulders and a face distorted with anger. No. The girl grabbed her father's strong hand and tried to take a snow-white puppy of an unknown breed away from him. The man was just about to put the dog in his pocket, which is why the puppy barked so loudly. When he managed to put the puppy away, the children yelled loudly. What's going on here? I couldn't help myself and walked through the gate. A crowd of my nephews and nieces followed me. Who are you? The owner of the house looked at me straight in the face. Greenpeace. Are you aware that animal cruelty is a crime? He was silent for a few seconds, pondering my words, then turned his back on me and muttered, "Trespassing, too." I decided to change tactics. "Perhaps we can help you with something?" "Excuse me, what's your name?" "Herman." "Herman what?" Herman went around and around in my head. And then it hit me. So this was the widower the local aunts had promised me for a husband. This one. A hippo with a dog in a bag. Yes, it's a natural Gerasim he wanted to drown poor Muma. Nothing, I said softly. "Give me the dog. I'll take her to the river myself. There's nothing to worry about." "Why go to the river?" Herman Gerasim pretended not to understand. "Or are you the owner of the puppy?" he suggested. The children said they had found a dog by the road. "In the hostess. It just ran away, and now you've found it." "It's a girl." Herman squinted suspiciously and shook the bag. The mournful barking came from there again. "Well, yes, this is Masha, our dog," I nodded. "Hooray! We have a dog." My nephews and nieces shouted with joy and gave me away. "Yours, then?" "Well, not ours. What's the point of drowning her now that she's nobody's?" "Why drown her?" The man was astonished. "And why did you put her in a bag? Were you going to drown Muma in the river like her predecessor?" The man looked at me closely. "Well, you have fantasies. First of all, it's not a bag, it's a blanket. And I wrapped the dog in it because I'm allergic to wool. And I wasn't going to drown her, I was just going to take her to where my kids would pick her up. There is nothing wrong with that. I can't have a dog in the house, and the kids crave it. Hence the conflict, which I hope to resolve without outside help. You can't take a step in this village without being attacked. I'm an adult. Do you think I can't handle the children?" The man continued to grumble as he paced the yard. Not understanding, I blinked and fell silent. "Listen, what if you try to keep the animal for now? Check it out, maybe it won't cause you an allergic reaction." I decided that this was not the time to understand the intricacies of this Herman's nature. The dog's fate is what brought me here. Well, the tear-stained eyes of the blue-eyed girl and her brother. You're not going to sleep on the same pillow with her. The dog can be kept in the yard, and the children will be happy. When children get attached to an animal, it hurts them even more. You should know that, the man said, pointing at my nephews and nieces, probably thinking of them as my children. If you can't keep the animal after a while, it'll take it in, and the kids can visit the puppy anytime. I decided my mission was complete and, smiling goodbye to Herman's children, I walked out into the street. I really wanted to turn around and see if he was watching me go. But instead I muttered "Buryuk" and accelerated. Our next meeting was on September 1st, near the school. My sister, her husband, and I were escorting another member of their large family to first grade for the first time. Even from a distance, I saw a tall figure towering over the rest of the parents. Herman looked confused, but tried not to show it. Standing next to him was the boy who had begged him and his sister to leave the dog. He was proudly holding a huge bouquet of flowers, and something white was spinning near his feet. I looked closer and smiled happily. Herman was holding the leash the dog was tied to. "Wow, I really kept it," I muttered, drawing a puzzled look from my sister. As the children entered the school building and the parents began to go about their business, I lingered to get the last shots of the procession of bright buds, bows, and happy, anxious eyes. When I caught up with my sister, I was horrified to see Herman standing next to her. "Why aren't you interested in your protege's fate?" the man asked, turning to my sister. When he saw me, he stopped dead in his tracks. I must say, my sister and I are a bit alike, but no one has ever mistaken us for each other. I'm sorry, the man said, embarrassed, and walked forward. What's wrong with Herman? Asked my sister's husband, looking at us both suspiciously. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about what my sister had told me about Herman. His story may have been one of many, but it still made you think. Herman and his family came to the village 4 years ago. The villagers were very surprised that the family had moved from the capital to their area. There were also rumors that Herman held some kind of position in the authorities and had crossed someone's path. And in our time, apparently, citizens are exiled, although their relocation is voluntary. 2 years ago, Herman's wife became ill and died. The man was left alone with 2 small children. As I walked down the street, I raised my hands, palms up, and turned my face toward the cool little drops. Are you looking for a connection to space? There was a chuckle from around the corner of the house. Then a huge hooded shadow floated out. And you? And I'm just walking the dog. Thanks to you, by the way. A small white puppy approached, sniffed my leg, and barked with satisfaction. What did you call her? Masha. I smiled insecurely. It's a good name. So you're Maya, Rita's sister? That's right. But you confused me. I even had to ask the neighbor, and she almost burst with joy when I asked her about you. You're wrong. I laughed and told Herman about the locals' plans for our reunion. So we stood side by side on the street, our faces turned to space, and became the cause of new gossip, because Baba Katia, my neighbor, couldn't sleep that night either. Mike, you should have gone to live with Herman, and his children would have been easier, the local gossips advised. You can help Sasha with his studies, you're a teacher. The fact that I taught an art class at a local school elevated me to the rank of teacher in their eyes. And my relationship with Herman was an established fact for them. And there was no relationship between us. We just talked sometimes when we met. Or we just went to the river together and took him and my children with us. Well, and Masha's dog too. Where can I go without her now? Sometimes, in the evening, we drank tea together at Herman's house, or sat on the porch of my house and argued about variations in the creation of the universe. So there was no relationship. There just wasn't. Sasha, Herman's son, also studied in my circle, and I discovered a great talent in him. The boy had an unearthly desire for beauty. He could draw from memory the wing pattern of a butterfly he met in the forest, or the autumn sky with all its iridescence. His sister Valeria was the opposite. Physically, she couldn't sit still, and Eve never met a more lively child. The children also experienced their mother's departure from their lives in different ways. Lyra was very sad. She could cry on my chest if she saw any reminder of her mother, but he would quickly calm down and move on to something else. Sasha thought about his mother all the time. He never cried, but his sadness lived inside him. She didn't eat him. No. On the contrary, she was his support and strength. And it was as if he became stronger with this feeling inside. That's what happens when a person leaves. He becomes someone's angel, or a guardian, or a giver of his power. For everyone in their own way. This was especially noticeable when Sasha was painting. His hands seemed to be controlled by someone invisible and very kind. One winter I broke my leg. At first I lay in bed very sad. I looked at my cast, then at the mirror on the wall and thought, my life is almost over, or rather, its most important and interesting part is over. Old age is coming, when I will be alone in this house. I didn't notice the tears welling up in my eyes. Yes! A loud voice rang out as soon as the door opened. I told you, that a cake is not an unnecessary thing. Look at the flood here. You can't cure it with a few cakes. Cake is the best medicine, Valeria said sententiously. And Sasha just stood beside me and looked into my eyes with understanding, as if he had read everything, all my thoughts. They brought with them the freshness of a frosty day, a sea of sweets, and something else so elusive and long forgotten. A tenderness that sounded like a long lullaby. And that's when I burst into tears. I didn't see what Herman was doing because I was so ashamed of my tears that I tried not to look in his direction. And then a lump of snow flew onto the pillow next to me. Wet, cold, and fantastically unreal. The children squealed with delight. A bowl of snow landed on the table next to the bed, and a real mess ensued. We made snowballs and threw them all over the living room. It was then that I learned to move with the help of crutches and improvised objects. Defending myself from the snow, I flew around the room like a saiga, not like an old ant with a broken leg. As summer approached, the local gossips began to chatter that their matchmaking had worked. Sasha and Lyra needed motherly care. So it was a mutually beneficial alliance. Between me and the children, I mean. One day I ran home, so young and happy, to change my clothes. Fishing was ahead of me. It became my favorite activity. We sat down on an old bridge over the river, fishing rods in our hands. We are me, Herman, my nephews and nieces, and my children Sasha and Laraka. And also the snow-white dog Masha, where else without her? Whenever one of us caught a shiny fish, Masha would burst into joyful barking. And we laughed heartily. Humming a song to myself, I ran to the veranda and, opening the door, screamed in surprise. I'd gotten used to not locking the front door. The villagers often did. An unlocked door was considered the most reliable lock, as in the song. Of course, there were guys in the village who were capable of stealing, but they just didn't climb up to their own. Artyom, I cried when I saw my ex-husband. Artyom was stretched out on my couch looking at the tablet screen. Oh, Mike. Eve been waiting for you. Where are you going? He even tried to hug me, enveloping me in an unfamiliar smell. I pulled away and looked at his face. What are you doing here? Eve come to pick you up, Artyom smiled broadly. Seeing that my reaction did not meet his expectations, Artyom went into the kitchen and sat down on a chair. Mike, I missed you. You and I are tired of living apart. We both understand that we were made for each other. We just got a little lost. You're lost. Lost what? You got lost. I remembered the way all the time. Artyom ignored my words. Come on, Mike, get ready. Let's start all over again. It won't work at first. I sighed and sat down across from him. You see, Artyom, I already have a life of my own. It's different from the old one, and I don't want to go back. What do you mean you don't want to? Do you like living in this dump? Imagine, I really like it. Artyom looked at my face for a long time, and after making sure that my words were sincere and not caused by a feeling of wounded pride, he said, let's say you're really used to living in the country, but you couldn't get used to living without money. What do you live on here? Unemployment benefits? Why not? I have a normal income and enough money. I work at the school and put my work on the internet. There are so many orders, I can't even keep up. And my paintings are for sale. People come to the village to pick them up. As you said, the views are richer here, which is probably why it became so easy for me to write. Artyom was silent again for a long time. You need me anyway. You couldn't stop loving me so easily. I shrugged. What about your new family? A son? This twirl tricked me. She lied about having a miscarriage and wasn't pregnant at all. I found out too late, but now we're separated. So Mike, I don't have a son. And I have. And a daughter too. And my children are the best because they were born to the best man in the world. Artyom spoke for a long time, but I did not listen to him. She just left him and her former life behind and walked out the door. I ran towards the best man in the world as if I wasn't old at all, but the youngest. She skipped across the field, picking blades of grass along the way, feeling incredible freedom and joy.